Hi, Roy here, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year's. Welcome to a holiday edition of The Right Has Left. I am your host, Roy Garden, and welcome to my podcast. We've got, as always, some good things to talk about in relationship to the Trump administration. So having said that, let's go ahead and get going on this holiday edition of The Right Has Left. Some good news to start off with, and that is the economic growth, the gross domestic product, as reported from the government, had some growth this fourth quarter. The GDP growth was 4.3%, annualized, of course, up from 3.8% in the second quarter. Primary drivers: accelerated consumer spending at 3.5% growth and increased exports and higher government spending. Current dollar nominals, the GDP estimated at $30.49 trillion as the second quarter. Inflation impact: the personal consumption expenditures, the PCE price index, rose by 2.8% in quarter three, up from 2.1%, alongside growth. Economic context and global standing: jobless growth. Despite the high GDP numbers, economists have noted a jobless growth trend, with unemployment climbing to 4.6% as hiring stalls. Reporting delays. Of course, this report was significantly delayed due to a record-long federal government shutdown. And I talked about this in my last podcast, that these numbers are probably skewed just a little bit because some data was just not available. So, they had to go with what they had to work with. And so global comparison, let's take that for an example. India still remains one of the fastest growing major economies with real GDP. Now let's talk about some of the caveats why it may not be quite as good as you think it is by those numbers. Of course, the Trump administration is going to run with those numbers and do the rah, rah, rah out there to his base. And that's a good thing. And again, I'm not taking away from everything. Any kind of growth is a positive sign. Now, it is annualized quarterly. This number reflects what the growth rate would be if the economy grew at the Q3 pace for a full year. It's not a standalone monthly or annual figure. Decoupling labor market: the strong GDP figure contrasts with a cooling labor market where the unemployment rate, as I just talked about, hit a 4.6%, which is the highest it's been since 2021, and the job growth has slowed. Now, the volatile components of this: the figure was influenced by volatile components like trade and inventories, a decrease in imports, a subtraction in GDP calculation boosted with the number. Core GDP growth is lower when stripping out these volatile items, such as the core real GDP or real final sales to private domestic purchasers. And it grew at a more moderate, though still solid rate of about 3%. Now, the consumer strain: other data in the report showed disposable personal income growth slowed, and consumer confidence fell for the fifth month in a row, suggesting potential headwinds for future spending. Now, I could go on and on about all of this, and you'd probably be bored to death, because when it comes to showing numbers and figures, you're going to go like, okay, Roy, great, let's move on. So, the GDP, as I said, did increase, and that's a good thing. But, playing the devil's advocate here, even on a Christmas holiday season, I had to show you what some of the numbers were skewed, and some of those numbers, because of higher unemployment, that kind of threw it off. The other thing that came out that's not in this report is, we all talk about how everybody is spending so much money for the Christmas holiday season. And again, that's a great thing. I'm glad we are all spending money for the holiday season, as people like to buy presents for their kids and everything else. But it has shown that credit card usage has tremendously increased for this holiday season. And that means people don't have money, so they're tapping into their credit cards, which is increasing debt. And that is not a good thing. I know some of us will like to just go with Christmas and say, okay, we can't afford to buy presents, so we'll just go without. But again, people are tapping into those credit cards, and there you go. So I don't know what to say. I know kids like to have their presents, and we want to have a happy holiday season, so each to their own. So I just want to report on the good news before I get into the controversial news. So let's go ahead and get started, and that is going to be my podcast for today, my top story, and that is going to be this little fiasco that's been going on with CBS News and 60 Minutes. Yeah. So CBS News suddenly shelved a 60-minute segment featuring the accounts of Venezuelan men being deported by the Trump administration to the notorious maximum security prison in El Salvador. Now, one of its own correspondents fears the program is being dismantled, and some employees are threatening to quit. And yeah, that is true, and that's all because of this person right here. And she is the one to put the program together. And what is kind of good about this, before I get in talking here about Sharon Alfonsi, is the fact of the matter is that the 60-minute segment did air on the Canadian side of our good neighbors to the north, Global TV. And they streamed the segment that was supposed to be cut. And I, myself, along with many, many others, downloaded that stream, and I do have a copy of that 60-minute segment that they try to cut here in the U.S., and I'll run some of that in the background. Unfortunately, I don't have the rights to run the whole show in its entirety, although you can find this online and watch it for yourself if you want to. But it's a very telling segment. I'm glad that it was done. Now, they did pull it about 2 hours after it aired because CBS said get it off the air. But again, millions have already watched this segment, so I don't know what it's going to accomplish by saying, they can't do that. But getting back to Sharon Alfonsi, she did say in an internal memo that the public will correctly identify this as a corporate censorship, which it really is. According to Alfonsi and some CBS sources who spoke with some other reporters on condition of, hey, don't mention my name here. The story had been fully fact-checked and legally vetted by Time. The network publicized it on this past Friday afternoon, but CBS News editor-in-chief, and let's talk about her a little bit here. Barry Weiss. She weighed in with questions on Saturday morning. Some sources said Alfonsi said Weiss spiked the story. One of the main issues Weiss raised was the lack of response from the Trump administration to the reporting. Now, according to Alfonsi, we requested responses to questions and or interviews with the Department of Homeland Security, the White House, and the State Department. However, Stephen Miller, and even Stephen Miller is getting in on this. We all know who this guy is. Stephen Goebbels Miller. Kind of looks like Goebbels, doesn't he, a little bit? Compare those pictures. Anyway, he said on a Fox News segment that he was never asked or even questioned about the piece. And he went on Fox News and he just went on a ranted and raving, saying nobody contacted the White House or him. And he also rebuked the piece. Yeah, watch this.
But more fundamentally, this is another pathetic 60 Minutes hatchet job. And you have these 60-minute producers who are living in comfort and security in their West End condos trying to make us feel sympathetic for these monsters? Have you seen the tattoos, the face tattoos, the body tattoos on these killers? Would one 60 Minutes producer or writer agree to spend 30 minutes? I'll make a deal. We will pick someone at random that we sent to CCOT, just a random lottery drawing, and they will spend one day overnight in your apartment. Who was taking that deal at 60 Minutes? Nobody. Because they know that these are monsters who got exactly what they deserved. Because under President Trump, we're not going to let little girls get raped and murdered anymore. And every one of those producers at 60 Minutes engaged in this revolt, fire them. Clean house, fire them. That's what I say.
Now, at one point, we suggested that the program try to interview the White House Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, and, of course, and she even gave Stephen Miller's number. And, of course, as you just saw in that segment, Stephen Miller said, I was never, ever contacted. Now, Alfonsi argued in her memo that the administration's strategic silence cannot be allowed to become a veto of a critical story. The refusal to be interviewed is a tactical maneuver designed to kill the story, she wrote. If the administration's refusal to participate becomes a valid reason to spike a story, we have effectively handed them a kill switch for any reporting that they find inconvenient. Weiss responded in a statement to the New York Times late Sunday night. My job is to make sure that all stories we publish are the best they can be. Holding stories that aren't ready for whatever reason, that they lack sufficient context, or that they are missing critical voices happens day in every newsroom. I look forward to airing this important piece when it's ready. Of course, it's already aired, basically. And, what is bad about all this is Weiss is basically, a buddy of Donald Trump. And as you're well aware of, when Paramount, who owns CBS, did the merger with Skydance, there was a lot of behind-the-scenes manipulation that went on. And because of that, there were some things that were behind the scenes agreed upon, and one of those was that CBS would become more friendly and more positive as far as its reporting on the Trump administration if they let this deal go through, which, she promised, and they did. So this is what you get, and of course, President Trump has been, blasting the news magazine on Truth Social, sounding disappointed about CBS's news owner. In late 2024, Trump sued CBS, as you're all well aware of, and his parent company, Paramount, under a different ownership at that time, alleging 60 Minutes deceptively edited a Kamala Harris interview to benefit her campaign. And Weiss, as a new editor-in-chief, said, well, we'll make sure that never happens again, and we'll work to make sure that we portray you in a positive light. Now, that lawsuit, which legal experts said widely viewed to be legally dubious, loomed a large over Paramount's attempt to merge with Skydance, and of course, they got everything together, and it went through. Now, a production company led by David Ellison and supported by Ellison's father, Larry, the Oracle billionaire, the lawsuit became a flashpoint inside CBS News, where journalists worried that both the old and the new corporate leaders sought to mollify Trump at the cost of the newsroom's credibility. And you just saw this, where Weiss tried to kill the story that Sharon, got on the air and produced. And like I said, I want you to watch this because it's a very well done story. And of course, Stephen Miller, with his rant that I just showed you from when he went on Fox News, he was saying all of these alleged things about they're all rapists, gang killers, and thugs. And in the interview that you're going to see, that's, this one person that she talked to is in fact not the case. And in fact, this prison, they love people and journalists to walk through it. They love to parade the prisoners around. They love to show people, they're not hiding anything. They say, come in and see how terribly we treat people here in El Salvador at this prison. And that's how, she got this story. They were basically welcome with open arms to come in and take a look at it. And, so, with Trump's new buddy on the FCC, you're going to get these kind of concessions from newsmakers that want to, in this world of corporate merging, they need the approval of the FCC. And so unless you're doing positive stories with Donald Trump, he's going to make sure, and with his control that he now has, that perhaps you may not even have a broadcast license. It's no secret Trump wants a state-controlled media. He wants everything to be positive about him or don't air it at all. And so, again, when they required Weiss to start up the Free Press for $150 million and installed her as editor-in-chief related to this takeover that she did, she started, putting her thumb down on a lot of the news stories that CBS News and 60 Minutes produces. And so it's sad that we have come to this day and age that we are going to be looking at state-controlled media. The freedom of the press is basically slowly dissipating. Your First Amendment rights are slowly dissipating. And I didn't talk about this. It's not on my agenda, but I'm going to bring it up right now. As some of you are all aware of now, TikTok has now been agreed upon and sold to U.S. entities who, in turn, will be controlling 50% of TikTok. And so you're going to be seeing a lot of the content that you are now seeing on TikTok probably being suppressed or not to be allowed, or they'll say you can't talk about that, you can't run that, or you can't put that on there. So we're going to make sure that you don't, and we're going to take all of that down. So that's going to happen with U.S. control of TikTok. So people are going to be looking for other platforms probably here very shortly. All of this is going to be happening in the next couple of months where U.S. control of TikTok now takes over. So again, another platform. In fact, TikTok is where a lot of people were running this CBS 60 Minutes story that aired in Canada, and that's where I actually pulled it down. So again, I really encourage you to look at that because it's quite interesting. And I really think that once you watch that, you will see how what these people are going through. That a lot of people that are in that prison have absolutely zero criminal records, contrary to what Stephen Miller says. They were trying to get their U.S. citizenship. And ICE came in and just flat out deported them and said, you're all criminals just because they have tattoos on them and everything else. So it's a slump. It's what's going on with immigration right now. When they're told to pick up 3,000 people a day, they sadly are just taking anybody and everything and loading them up and not checking them and just shipping them out because of the color of their skin or whatever the case may be. And that's one thing that I hope as we go into this new year, some changes are going to occur, because not every single person is a criminal. Not every single person is a rapist. Not every single person is a thug. Not every single person has mental deficiencies. Not every single person has committed a crime, and but they don't care. So. Let's pray 2026 turns out to be a little bit better year. In other news, let's talk about a recent press release that President Donald Trump had when he went and announced that the U.S. will now commission a new series of heavily armed Navy battleships, of course, named after himself, as part of a revamped Golden Fleet. And, of course, he's going to start constructions on these pretty quick, at least for two of them. And on this, they are going to be called the Trump-class USS Defiant ship, which will be equipped to carry an array of weapons, which is expected to begin very soon, with Trump saying the first vessels will be operational in 2.5 years. Aha! Well, we'll have to wait and see. Watch this quick segment.
As Commander-in-Chief, it's my great honor to announce that I have approved a plan for the Navy to begin the construction of two brand new, very large, the largest we've ever built, battleships. You used to build the Iowa, the Missouri, the Wisconsin, the Alabama, many others. We had big battleships. These are bigger, but they will have 100 times they'll be 100 times the force, the power. They'll help maintain American military supremacy, revive the American shipbuilding industry, and inspire fear in America's enemies all over the world. We want respect. We're going to have it. We already have it. We're more respected now than we ever were. We envision that these two ships, we're talking about 10, but we're going to start with 2, and we're going to quickly morph into 10. And ultimately, we think it's going to be anywhere from 20 to 25 of these.
Now, the announcement is part of a larger planned expansion of the U.S. Navy by President Trump in both manned and unmanned vessels, including larger missile-armed warships and smaller vessels. Now, Trump said he approved the construction of 2 of those new battleships, as you saw in that report, with a plan to build up to 25 of them. They'll be the fastest and the biggest and by far 100 times more powerful than any battleship ever built. And once completed, Trump said the armed vessels would be equipped to carry hypersonic and extremely lethal weapons and would be the flagships of the United States Navy. Trump, who spoke well flanked on both sides with posters of renderings of those Trump-class ships, said the vessels would be built domestically and their construction would create thousands of jobs. And according to a recent interview with the Wall Street Journal, what Trump had specifically asked for was big, beautiful battleship types as part of the fleet, which he, of course, seems to be getting. And he's going to get plenty of support to have them built. Now, there are some other vessels being based with the U.S. Coast Guard. They're going to be called Legion or Legend-class national security vessels, and they're going to be built by the Navy for the Coast Guard and to ramp up protection of our borders for those drug smugglers. And those also are going to be deployed to the Red Sea and the Caribbean, making sure that the requirements will be met. And they're going to be small surface combatant inventories. It's just right now it's just a third of what they say they have, and so they do need to increase their vessels, especially in the U.S. Coast Guard. Now, a similar vessel, the Constellation class frigate, which Trump approved during his first term in the office, back when he first was in his first term, that got canceled in 2025 after repeated delays and cost overruns. Now, only 2 ships were reportedly expected to be delivered after approximately $2 billion was spent on the project. We used to make so many ships, Trump said in March, now we don't make any of them. We got to get back in building ships really, really quick. So he said. And of course, the drawback on these is going to probably take a long time to get these ships built, especially when they're at 30,000 to 40,000 tons in their weight. And of course, he wants them larger than aircraft carriers. Now, warships, as we now know them, typically have been, put on the back burner because they're slow. They were basically built at the time to operate in more shallow waters, and we have such increased technology today, like with drones and things. Battleships, as Trump is envisioning these, really don't serve the purpose that they once did. Now, if he wants to come up and create these new technology advanced battleships, then so be it. But that's why the Navy really stopped building them. Now, recent administrations in both parties have flaunted these, these battleships because Trump's just trying to make a political point. Because of the billions and billions of dollars that it's going to take to build them. He's already got a high deficit running with his big, beautiful bill that, the national debt has just skyrocketed because of his big, beautiful bill, although, he says he wants to save money. So we... Again, the Navy has questions about this. Number one is the cost to actually build them and how fast they can be built. Trump has, said a lot of things, but, what the Navy has got concerns about is his name. He wants to have his name on anything and everything because he feels he's such a great, wonderful guy. As you know, all battleships, all ships that the Navy has out there that, we have here in the United States, they're typically named after states like the USS Wisconsin, the USS Arizona, the USS Maine. Most of our warships have names that come after states. To call all of these ships Trump ships because they're the Golden Fleet. Even the Navy behind the scenes has told reporters, so we will, again, if they ever get built, wait and see what they actually will be named, if they'll ever get built within this president's term, because he's only got 2 years left. And whether his legacy will be carried on, be called, the USS Trump or whatever they may be, we will basically have to wait and see what happens. Yeah. So let's move on to the Epstein Files. So this is also in the news. As you're well aware of, the Justice Department on Tuesday released a large trove of records related to Jeffrey Epstein, including allegations about the late financier's ties to President Donald Trump. The release, by far of the Justice Department's largest, is in its effort to comply with the Epstein Files Transparency Act, included the most new information, along with claims about Trump that the department said are unfounded and false. Yes, so they say. So, the reason they say this is because they want to protect the president. And both Pam Bondi and her Undersecretary Todd Blanche are, of course, now under fire because they say they are delaying those files. They are playing politics, and they're charged by many Democrats and some Republicans for heavily redacting documents when they, in fact, are supposed to be transparent. Now, one of the newly released emails published Tuesday claimed that flight logs showed Trump flew on Epstein's planes at least 8 times in the 1990s, including once with an unnamed 20-year-old woman. Of course, that name was redacted, as it should be. The email, which a federal prosecutor in New York sent in January 2020 to an undisclosed person, says, for your situational awareness. And I just wanted to let you know that the flight records we received yesterday reflect that Donald Trump traveled in Epstein's private jet many more times than previously has been reported. And we just want to bring that to your attention. And they also said that this report, including a period of time when we are expecting to be charged Maxwell, and of course you all know Ghislaine Maxwell, she was in fact charged and she was indicted. And in July of 2020 on federal sex trafficking charges, she was found guilty and was serving, in fact is still serving, a 20-year prison sentence, although she's now in a real cush cell in Colorado with her little dog and getting about anything that she wants because she did some private conversations with the present Justice Department. And in turn for her conversations, they agreed to make her stay a little bit more comfortable. And she, in fact, is enjoying the high life now while she's in prison. Now, that email did say Trump, who at the time was serving his first term as president, is listed as a passenger on at least 8 flights between 1993 and 1996, including at least 4 flights on which Maxwell was also present. He is listed as having traveled with, among others, and at various times, Marla Maples, his daughter Tiffany, and his son Eric. On one flight in 1993, he and Epstein are the only 2 listed passengers. On another, the only 3 passengers are Epstein, Trump, and then another 20-year-old woman, which we just talked about. And on other flights, 2 other passengers, respectively, were women who would be possible witnesses in a Maxwell case. The names of both the sender and the recipient were redacted. Now, about this redaction. As you're well aware of, if you've been following any social media, there have been several hackers, young people, especially founded on TikTok and others, who have learned to unredact the redacted files because they weren't securely done so properly. And one of the alleged files that got unredacted is this one. Now, I'm not going to read it. You can read it for yourself. I'll leave it up there for a little bit. We don't know if, of course, this file is legitimate, whether it's real or whether it's fake. I'm just putting it out there for you to see about how this hacker allegedly unredacted a redacted file. So, and there are some other files that others have proven are real, and they got unredacted. And again, it's the Justice Department to get this stuff out there that this probably happened. So, and again, I don't know if that file is authentic or fake or whatever. We just don't know. The Justice Department has already put out a disclaimer that many of these files are not real, that they have within their possession. They are fake. How they know that, I don't know. There has been one file that was put out there that after people went through it, was proven to be fake because the signatures didn't match up and the post stamp, and I'll be talking about that in just a second. But again, we also need to fully put a disclosure out here that everything I am saying is the President Trump has never, ever been charged or alleged to be charged or alleged to have done anything wrong with his name being associated with these files. As the same with former President Bill Clinton. Of course, the Republicans are showing a lot more pictures of him than of Trump. But again, even Bill Clinton has never, ever been charged with anything in his relationship with the Epstein Files. So all of these people are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. So even with the stuff that I just showed you, doesn't mean Trump done anything illegal or wrong, okay? So always keep that in mind as we talk about these Epstein files. Neither Trump, Bill Clinton, or anybody else has been charged with any crime, all right? So no wrongdoing. White House official about the emails and everything else has said, talk to the Justice Department, talk to Pam Bondi or Todd Blanche, see what they got to say about this. Because a lot of reporters are going to the White House. You got any comment? You got any comment? And they go, no, we don't. So the department did post earlier on X that they acknowledged that there were multiple references to Donald Trump in the latest document dump, and some include untrue and sensationalist claims, I just said. And, when you're doing 30,000 pages dumps and trying to, redact a lot of those things, that's what's going to happen. And again, these are unfounded claims, and I just said that. So do keep that in mind. Some of these PDF files and videos that are coming down may not, in fact, be all that they seem to be. Now, and again, this is what I want to point out in showing you about some of the stuff being fake. Now, there was supposed to be a note that was signed by J. Epstein addressed to Larry Nassar. This was in the news. The sports doctor who was convicted of sexually abusing numerous girls and women in his care. Nassar, 62, is serving a prison sentence of 40 to 175 years behind bars. An envelope also released in the same batch before had a postmark of August 13th, 2019 at a U.S. Postal Service facility in Northern Virginia, 3 days after Epstein died in his jail cell in New York City while he was awaiting trial on sex trafficking charges. Investigators say he died by suicide. The note says, "Dear Ellen, as you know by now, I have taken the short route home." It then tells Nassar, "We shared one thing, our love and caring for young ladies and the hope that they would reach their full potential." The note then says that our president also shares our love for young and noble girls, and then bemoans that he and Nassar have been locked up. Life is unfair. The note concludes the envelope was marked "Return to Sender" and sent back to Epstein's jail because Nassar no longer is at the facility to which it was mailed. Another document shows the FBI requested a handwriting analysis to confirm it was Epstein's handwriting, but it does not include the results. To update you, they did do that analysis as the signatures do not match. All right, so and bottom line is it's pretty much been figured out that note was fake and it's not real because if he was in jail, they're going to censor any mail that goes out. And, of course, the postmarks are not the same. So that is not a real letter. It's fake. So, and just like what I just showed you earlier, there's no... Because this is third party, I don't know if that piece of email that is real or fake either. I downloaded the files. I tried just, cherry picked a few of the PDFs, and I was not able to remove the redaction on them by the way they showed on the social media sites. Not to say that there are some of those PDFs that were probably rushed through that you could unredact the redactions. So it's just kind of interesting how all this stuff's going on. It's good stuff to talk about, all right? So I had a letter to the DOJ Acting Inspector General Don Berthelm. A group of 12 senators said the DOJ had violated the law by not getting all these documents out. And so to wrap this up about these documents, here's the bottom line. If, in fact, they have 1 million more files to go through, there's no way in hell that the Justice Department can get all of these files out with redactions for the general public to see. Because I fully stand behind them. They've got to protect the innocent that are in these documents. The girls' names, all of that has to be going through. Now, I don't think they should be redacting public images names like, President Trump, Bill Clinton, or anybody else. The victims, yes. Everybody else, there's supposed to be transparency. And it is very true that Bondi and Blanche are playing politics, trying to protect Trump when his name shows up or images of him when he shows up as much as they possibly can. And to me, that's wrong. Like I said, they'll put out tons of pictures of Bill Clinton, but they won't put anything out of Donald Trump. And when people catch them, and when they see the files and they recognize that it's Trump with the little black things across his eye, they go, well, we didn't realize that. We'll re-release that. Bonnie's going to do whatever she can to protect the president, and that's our job. But still, yeah, just get it done, okay? And I'm going to wrap up this podcast with one thing I want to talk about. And before I do this, as we go into 2026, and of course, as we go into 2026, now we're going to get into the midterms. As you've been watching this last video about Donald Trump talking about the battleships and watching his newscasts lately, when I say newscasts, his press conferences, his demeanor and his anger and his speech and him not being able to follow the teleprompter much anymore. Well, and also keep in mind that psychologists, without examining him, have had noticed a lot of change in his behavior, whether it be dementia setting in, or the things are going on with his hands and the weight in his feet. And the guy's hitting 80 years old, becoming one of the oldest presidents we've ever had. And so this is just an observation. Now, as I summarize this and close out for the 2025 podcast that the right has left, listen to some things and this is professional psychologists talking. And I myself, I'm not a professional psychologist, but I've had over 40 credit hours in psychology, and my degree is entrepreneurship and business. Okay, that's on top of my degree in broadcast journalism. So I know a little bit about what psychologists are talking about. So key traits observed, and this is, of course, I want you to keep in mind, this is an op-ed, all right? This is just me talking. This is a commentary, all right? So keep that in mind, but it's important that I get this out. Key traits observed in public behavior, which are observed by some commentators and some mental health professionals, point to the following behavior patterns as potentially aligning with psychopathic people or related traits thereof. And what do psychopathic people have? They have lack of empathy, and they have unconcern for people that they have injured. They are habitual liars without shame or guilt when caught, impulsively and inconsistent in their decision-making, aggressive and manipulative behaviors with a drive to dominate. They have lack of shame or guilt, making it easy to deceive and divide. They have disregard for facts and evidence. They often use exaggerated and just grandiose statements. They ultimately, while many are trained professionals, observers see this person's behavior as consistent with being on the lines with being psychopathic. The question of whether he is a psychopath does not have a definitive, universally agreed upon answer from the clinical community due to professional ethical guidelines and the lack of a direct evaluation. Now, you need to understand that that is true. What I just read are the traits of a person who is a psychopath. But nobody has professionally set this person down and analyzed him and been able to observe him and offer a professional opinion. But many psychologists, from just watching videos of him, agree that he has a lot of psychopathic traits. And I have to agree with them, And it's just not him. Other people in his administration, Stephen Miller is another one that has psychopathic traits. Is that a bad thing or is that a good thing? See, that's another thing you got to ask. Some people say it's good for some people to have psychopathic traits because that means that they can get things done. Sometimes it takes that to get what you want and what you want to get done. So some people even say that being a psychopath is okay in certain situations. Most people who have a professional job or are CEOs of big corporations have psychopathic traits. That doesn't make them a bad person. It doesn't make them a good person either. So those are things that you got to think about. Now, things about President Trump. Let's look at this. He claimed, for example, that that the United States defeated England in their Revolutionary War because the Continental Army took over the airports. Do you remember that? He actually said that. He claimed that the creation of income tax in 1913 created the Great Depression, which began in 1929. He suggested that injecting bleach into our bloodstream could cure COVID. We all remember that in his first term. We also remember him saying that perhaps dropping a nuclear bomb into an eye of a hurricane might get rid of the hurricane and save Florida. We remember that, all right? He has said a lot of bizarre and outlandish things. And this clip that I showed you where he wants to build these Trump battleships. He had a hard time reading the notes and saying things, and when he can't understand what he's reading, he just goes off and starts doing this and and just making up shit. So I have concerns for our president. I really do. And as we go into 2026, pay attention to his physical demeanor and his behavior. And in fact, I literally pray for our entire country as we go into 2026. Let's hope that we have some changes during the midterms, at least with the House of Representatives, so we can gain back control. Because right now, the whole purpose of this country of having a Republican and a Democrat is called checks and balances. The Senate and the House of Representatives are there for checks and balances of the president. And right now, because of this Supreme Court that we have, which also should have checks and balances, but they always have the final say, they have given this guy so much power that and the things and the loopholes that he's finding. He's got some smart attorneys on his side that find these loopholes. He's not doing this all on his own. He's got some people behind the scenes that are really pulling the strings. And to give him all the power that he wants, saying, drug runners are terrorists, so that using the word terrorist gives him the authority to put our military out there and doing what they're doing, even in international waters. Rounding up all these immigrants, using the word terrorist. That's how he's getting around all that without Congress approving one damn thing. But, he still has some loyal Republicans that give him a blank check and allow him to go out and do what he wants, thus passing this $1 trillion, big, beautiful bill, which has raised our national debt into more trillions and trillions of dollars, which he said that he was going to reduce the national debt, and he hasn't. But, of course, now he says, we got so much money from our tariffs that I'm going to give every American, making sure you're American, of course, a $2,000 check. And, of course, he can't do that on his own. That's going to take Congress as well. So I'm sure they're going to bring that up in 2026 as well. So, anyway, pray for our country, folks. Really, really pray for our country. And, that's my wish, that we get some things that are turned around as we go into 2026, because 2025 was not such a great year. So many people have suffered, and they hadn't need to be. And God bless you all. Thanks for watching my podcast here on the right and left. I look forward to you enjoying my podcast as we go into the new year. I hope and pray that you had a good Merry Christmas and that you will have a good New Year's. Until then, you try to have a good week. This is Roy Garden. Happy New Year.